mentioned about segues last week, not the kind that you write, but the verbal kind that take one from one thing to another. And so what I'm going to talk about next, understand, is a segue. I'm not trying to bore you all to death. We live in a very litigious society. I make it a special point to not talk about my state job too much in church, and not just here. I did that before whenever I was down south. So proximity to the state capitol has nothing to do with it. It's just in general, to me, good policy. And likewise, I don't talk just about, since I know some of you either work for or have worked for the state, I don't say anything about my parishioners at work. I kind of try to keep those things separated in a good, beneficial kind of way. But something that I can tell you is this. So this is a little bit about what I do. So if you ever are wondering, what is he doing all through the week? This is what I did before, and then kind of what I am doing now. So I work with local governments. I did before I came here, and then what I'm doing now. My primary focus is on local government. And before I came here, I was the sole records management field representative for every local government in the southern third of the state of Illinois. So I drove around a lot. Part of the reason why I sought out a promotion and a move up here is because as fun as it is to travel and see new places once in a while, when you're on the road 3 out of 5 days a week, when I was in my mid to late 20s, yeah, it was fun. In my 30s, yeah, it was all right. I'm kind of like, you know what? I want a nap. No, I'm not old, but I'm just at that point where I'm like, slowing it down just a little bit, or at least something different. Kind of nice. And what I did is I would work with local governments and help them with records management. I would show them this is what you have to keep, this is what you can get rid of, and this is the process that you need to go through to get rid of it. Now, I deal with the kind of the opposite end of it, which is, okay, here are the things that have to be kept forever, and if for some reason the place where you are at, if you can't manage handling them forever, let's see how we, the state archives, can step in to maybe take them and help preserve them and get them to one of our depositories throughout the state so that they're available for the public to use. Part of how I've looked at in the past, both what I did before and what I'm doing now, how I relate that to ministry is I am making sure that government records and government information is being preserved for the public trust, so that the public has access to them and we have responsive government. That's how I look at it anyways. So that's essentially what I do. And what I have found working with local government is that there is a lot of suing going on. I mean, a lot of suing. And countersuing. And so on. And what I tend to tell the local governments that I work with, generally, is that it is not a question of if they're going to get sued at some point, it's when. That's the reason why, again, any of you, I know some of you work for the state, if any of you work for local government, you'll know about risk management insurance, and that is what that is for, is to deal with those difficult times. I like to tell people that I was in the job of headache prevention. In other words, if you do what we tell you, you're going to have less headaches. But there's a lot of litigiousness going on, and it's not just within government, it's privately as well. And this, I feel, is an indictment of our culture and our society. So this is where that segue is going. Sorry, it took me a minute, the land is flying. We have this fixation with making sure that things are fair or done right by our own standards, of course, which always tend to be bent towards favoring us in nature. The result is we have created this society that is a society of us versus them. And don't worry, I will never make a point of saying this side got it right and this side doesn't. I'm kind of an equal opportunity voter most of the time. But we have this tendency of creating a society of us versus them. And it's not getting us anywhere very good. We look with suspicion at those who are different or think differently than ourselves. And one of the things I think I've benefited in working in state government is I have worked with people of all different walks of life. I have worked with people of all different political backgrounds, and I've learned to become someone who can interact peaceably and cooperate well with anyone from any background there. And I don't think of that as being a social chameleon, but I see that as being a peacemaker, as God has called us to be. If we want to be the beatitude people who are both anticipating and actively a part of building a new kingdom, we anticipate that God's new kingdom is not going to come in its fullness until Christ comes again. But too many times we have this idea of Christ coming again as this big fire and all that. Christ coming again is building and making everything new and fixing all of the brokenness. But in that anticipation of God making everything new again, we are also called to be a part of working towards that end in anticipation. Meaning that Christianity is not meant to be a religion of sitting on your hands saying, well, one of these days he's going to beam me up. I won't go into rapture theology. We'll say that. But yeah, we're not meant to be sitting around on our hands waiting for the big light in the sky to light up. We're to be active. We're to be doing in anticipation of a great new thing that Jesus is doing. Kind of people that Jesus is teaching about in the Sermon on the Mount. And I know this is tough, but we are going to have to let go. If we're going to be the attitude people, we're going to have to let go of having things our way. So Jesus addresses, he gives several examples of a unjust situation happening. And when Jesus, and what Jesus said we are to do about it. And it's very interesting. I'm going to kind of pick these apart here in a minute. The Old Testament law was not meant like gotcha with. However, inevitably, that is what people end up doing. The purpose of the law was to bring harmony and neighborliness into the world. We read the Ten Commandments, particularly what we sometimes call the secular or the civil part of the Ten Commandments. And what that is all about, it's going to sound old by the time we finish this series, but it's all about doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. Like don't murder, don't steal, don't covet, all of those things. It's about how to live in harmony with each other. It wasn't meant to be a hammer that you beat your neighbor over the head with. But Jesus is going to go even further than that. So let me look at it, please, here for just a minute. First example Jesus gives is when someone hits you on the right cheek, turn the other one towards them. This is kind of a hallmark of nonviolent resistance. Dr. Martin Luther King really embraced this. But this is, in many ways, this is even more in line with things that Dr. King taught that a lot of people realize. Let me explain. People generally did things with their right hand back then. And for someone to strike someone on the right cheek meant that they hit them with the back of their hand. Alright? Then, as now, that is a demeaning thing to do. It is something you did to someone who is lower than you on the social totem pole. So if someone did this to you, not only are they physically assaulting you, they are basically saying you are below me. Okay? That's bad. Jesus says, offer them the other cheek as well. So, yes, Jesus is saying, don't resist evil with violence. Don't resist violence with evil, same thing. But instead do good. Now, if you offer your left cheek, and they're still hitting you with their right hand, they're going to have to hit you with the palm of their hand. Still going to hurt, alright? However, there's something interesting here. Because when someone hits someone like this, that is what was done to an equal. So you were forcing your persecutor to say, you're basically saying, I am not going to resist you. But if you want to abuse me, I'm going to force you to acknowledge me as your equal. Alright? The second one. Jesus says, if someone sues you for your tunic, give them your cloak too. We have to understand, most people generally only had one outfit of clothing. So if someone took your tunic and all you had left was your cloak, that's all you have left to cover yourself with. If you give them that too, basically they're naked. Startling. But it's also a social statement, because what's going to happen? Let's say even in Springfield today, you see someone out on the street and they're naked. First things that pop in your mind is, why are they naked? And if you go to the point of asking them so, they say, well, my brother over here sued me for my shirt. And I thought, well, I might as well give him my cloak too. What are you going to think about the person that just did this to them? You're going to look at them and be like, man, you are a jerk. To leave someone destitute on the street with no shirt and nothing to cover themselves at all. So it's nonviolent, but it is not making oneself a doormat, as counterintuitive as it seems. It was a form of nonviolent resistance against evil. So Jesus is being a little subversive here. But then, after doing that, and understand these were all situations, this is dealing with things that we could say dealt with disputes between one person in the Jewish community and another person in the Jewish community. Then he says something strange. If a soldier forces you to go a mile, go two with him. This is not Jewish law. That was Roman law. Roman soldier had the right to grab anyone off the street, out of the field, and say, you're going to carry my stuff. And a Roman soldier had a lot of stuff that they had to pack around with them. Heavy metal thing. You're going to carry my stuff for the next mile, 1,000 paces. Jesus is then saying, essentially, because the Romans were seen as the enemy, if your enemy grabs you, makes you walk with him a mile, go two with him. This is all very subversive and topsy-turvy stuff. Letting your enemy smack you twice in the face, giving up all that you have. You're both being nonviolent, but you're also pointing out, basically forcing your persecutor to stoop below you. But then to those who are seen as the enemy, being willing to go with them further than even Roman law required. Very strange. See, we tend to like justice when it's slanted our way, but Jesus takes our ideas of justice and retribution and turns them on their ear. I'm hoping to get the opportunity. We're in the midst of this Sermon on the Mount series, and I have another one that I want to do at some point that is called Broken Signposts. And it was inspired by a book that I listened to. I tend to listen to more books than I get to read them. Called Broken Signposts. The series is not a reiteration of the book, but just kind of taking it and moving forward with it. But one of the broken signposts in our society is justice. We tend to think of justice in punitive terms. But justice that Jesus talked about is restorative. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But this is what Jesus is getting at here when he describes these situations. If someone takes from you, give them more. If your enemy forces you to help them, go above and beyond to help them more than even they ask. And Jesus goes even further. He says, you have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Now in your mind you might think, well, I can be nice to my enemy. I can be civil. But that'll be enough. No. Jesus says, love your enemies. Now understand, I know what it is like to be hurt. I've been hurt. I know. This isn't easy, what Jesus is asking. You might say, I can't love them. I'm angry with them. You were here a couple weeks ago. What did Jesus have to say about anger? In short, we are not allowed to hang on to our anger with our enemies. So what am I supposed to do then? Let your anger flow. You see someone getting away with something and it is just burning you up inside? If it's something illegal, yes, alert the proper authorities, but then let it go. It is not your job to be the bringer of vengeance. But who's going to punish them? Not your concern. Maybe no one. Maybe God in the end. But it's not your concern. How can all of this make sense? What is the point that Jesus is getting at here? In the Beatitudes, Jesus talks about the good life belonging to the peacemakers and those who are persecuted for doing good and following him. When we love our enemies, we start to show what a different kind of ethic and a different kind of world can look like. When we lay down our claims for revenge and instead look at Jesus' example of loving those who accused him on the cross as he hung dying, he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. You see how he worked to make a new kind of world. The kingdom that Jesus is bringing is one where there will be no enemies, there will be no hate. We are to work to be countercultural and show the world an alternative to the vengeful, violent, and self-seeking way of the world now. We see a world full of wars and hate and constant bickering and distrust and animosity. Jesus is calling us to be his ambassadors, revealing a different kind of world, a different kind of ethic, revealing justice not as punitive, but as restorative. Restorative, taking something that is broken and making it whole. Now, at this point, as we near the end, some of you are probably thinking, so you're saying that just everyone gets off with their meanness that they have done, that there won't be any justice. I'm not saying that at all. Restorative justice is still justice. God is not going to sit up in his throne and say, oh, all of those evil things that were done, I'm just going to brush those off. That is not what God is about. But what God is about is taking us in our brokenness and making us whole again. Taking the wrong and making things right again. And only He can do it. Every attempt throughout history to try to do justice on our own terms turns into vengeance. Jesus is showing us a bit of what the economy of heaven is like. Rain, He says, falls down on the just and the unjust alike, but we aren't to be like the world. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there in that? He says even corrupt tax collectors, pretty sure even those that are corrupt today, do the same. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even the pagans. Yeah, and they do that too. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Will we trip and fall along the way? Sure, but it is a journey toward perfection. The Wesleyan term we use is sanctification. Is the road that we are on. Justice is in God's hand, not ours. Thank God. When we try to determine what justice is on our own, we become no better than those who don't know God. When we love our enemies as well as our friends, we open the road for God's restorative justice to work. Because when we do that, something miraculous can happen. Some enemies may become friends. And the ones that don't are the ones that miss out on God's grace and the kingdom of His Son. By showing love like Jesus did, we throw open the doors of the kingdom so that its light can shine on a dark and sad and hurting world. And inevitably, some will come to the light because we were willing to act in love and not in hate. Be peacemakers. Be willing to suffer for others' sake. Be willing to turn your back on revenge in our world today. And embrace the kingdom of peace that King Jesus brings. Amen.